Welcome, everybody, to today's program, Defending Public Jobs and Services. Randi Weingarten and Lee Saunders on partnership in the Trump era. This is a special live recording of the CityWorks broadcast hosted by Laura Flanders. In a moment, I will introduce our guests. But first, I want to make sure that folks know that this is a special broadcast of CityWorks. CityWorks is produced by the CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies and CUNY TV. You can check out episodes both on CUNY TV's website and on SLU's website, and we'll share all those links in the chat now, but you'll also get them in follow-up emails. So today's program brings together two incredible national labor leaders. We have Lee Saunders, the president of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees with us today. We also have Randi Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers. Again, this program is hosted and moderated by Laura Flanders, who is the host of the CityWorks TV show, co-produced by SLU and CUNY TV. She's obviously also the host of Flanders and Friends, which reaches tens of millions of Americans on public television throughout the country. So again, we are very pleased to have Lee Saunders and Randi Weingarten. Now, please join me in welcoming Laura Flanders. Laura is a longtime legendary independent journalist and the host of Flanders and Friends on public television and CityWorks on CUNY TV. Please join me in welcoming Laura Flanders.
Thank you so much, Michael. I always, when people say legendary, I always think there are good legends and there are other sorts of legends. There are legends like the Loch Ness Monster and there are legends like Muhammad Ali. So take your pick. I'm really very happy to be here today. And this is a conversation about partnership. And I appreciate the partnership of AFT President Randi Weingarten and AFSCME President Lee Saunders in the conversation. But they are not the only participants. You out there in Zoom world are also participants. We'll be taking your questions throughout this conversation, so keep them coming. I know that the SLU audience, the School of Labor and Urban Studies there at CUNY, is never reluctant to pose good questions. So start now and we'll get to them as we go. To give you a little bit of background, Randi Weingarten started as a public school history teacher in Brooklyn, New York, becoming president of the AFT in 2008. She represents 1.7 million teachers, paraprofessionals, school-related personnel, as well as healthcare workers and others. Lee Saunders came to AFSCME back in 1978 as a labor economist and quickly rose through the ranks. He was elected president in June of 2012, where he became the first African-American to represent AFSCME's 1.4 million public service employees. His members are in the federal, state, and local government business, as well as in the nonprofit sector. And these two union leaders have been at the forefront of leading their unions, and I would say this country in lots of ways, through numerous crises. And we'll talk a little bit about where the clock really begins in this story, because it did not begin even with the first election of Donald Trump. But today's crises are specific. There's no question. The Trump administration is characterized by its concerted effort to reduce the federal workforce across all agencies, but none more so than at the Department of Education. He certainly hasn't stopped there, but neither have these unions. While collective bargaining, job security, workplace safety, the rule of law, academic freedom, voting rights are all under attack, these unions have not just played defense, although you will hear they have done that, bringing lawsuits and organizing. They have also moved into offense, and that's part of what we're going to talk about today. So you're going to hear a little bit about the actions that these unions have been taking in the courts, in the streets, in the legislature. And we're also going to hear what we, the people, can do in partnership with these unions. And I'm going to start by, we're going to get to the positive, as you can hear. We're going to get to the upbeat. But I do think I want to start with where we began in this most recent chapter of the crisis. And I'm going to come to you, Lee, to kick things off. When you, as it were, woke up after the inauguration of Donald Trump in his second term, 2025, a year ago. It's hard to believe it's only a year and a bit. And you began to see the mass layoffs, the unusual retirement offers, resignation offers, letters going to individuals, enticing them to retire. Can you take us back to your initial reaction as you realized the onslaught you were under? Not that it wasn't anticipated, but it was very painful, I think, at that moment to see our worst expectations being played out.
Well, thank you, Lauren. Thanks, everyone at CUNY for bringing us together. Randy and me, we've known each other for almost 30 years, not only here in Washington, D.C., but when I did a little stint in New York City at District Council 37. Both of us appreciate the opportunity to join your audience of labor leaders and activists and professors, students and organizers, those of you who are pushing and supporting a stronger and a better future. You're exactly the kind of believers and doers that we need right now in these very, very difficult times that we are faced with. I got to tell you, for those of you who may not know about AFSCME, let me just give you a brief history. We're a union of 1.4 million public service workers nationwide. AFSCME members work in every sector: healthcare, education. You've got public safety, public works and transportation, infrastructure, childcare, home care, social services, environmental protection, you name it. We represent those workers in those specific areas. And in short, they are the everyday heroes. We call our members the everyday heroes who provide essential public services to the citizens of this great country. They keep our communities safe, they keep our communities healthy, and they keep our communities strong. When they stand together in a union, they have the power to negotiate for better wages, benefits, and working conditions. They use their voice on the job to improve everyone's lives by strengthening the public service that all of us collectively will rely upon every single day. Now, just for some informational purposes, unlike private sector workers, and I want to make this clear because people really sometimes don't understand the difference, public sector workers are not covered by the National Labor Relations Act. We must fight state by state and city by city to win collective bargaining for public service workers across the country. And in many areas across the country, public service workers do not have collective bargaining because there is no law that's in existence which covers state and local government workers. But despite these challenges, public sector workers have become a force in the United States because we fight every single day alongside the AFT members and our other friends and allies in the unions, fighting for justice, respect, and dignity for all workers. But there are some who don't want to see us have this kind of power, and that's going to be, I think, the major part of the discussion today. Billionaires and anti-worker extremists understand that organized workers are a counterbalance to their unchecked greed and their unchecked power. So when Trump was elected, we knew a fight was coming, and we had to prepare for that fight and be ready. Everybody who heard of Project 2025, it made clear that their plan was to decimate public service worker unions by attacking our voice on the job, revoking our collective bargaining rights, essentially taking away that seat at the table that many public service workers currently have. Since day one, they've been coming at us from all angles, freezing and stripping funding for essential services and benefits, ripping away health and safety and wage protections, and of course, making it as difficult as possible for folks to organize in their workplaces. And all of this is happening at a time when working families are already under enormous pressure. The cost of living keeps going up: housing, healthcare, childcare, and millions of families are being asked to do more with less. So when we see these circumstances and consider how to respond, for us, the answer is very simple. We get organized. We get organized every single day, and we make our voices heard. We get organized in the courts, in the halls of power, in our workplaces, and in the streets of our communities. Now, today is also Workers' Memorial Day, a time when we stop to remember all those who lost their lives on the job, and an important reminder of why we can't give up. We can't give up our fight or give in to despair. Our members and retirees get it. They understand it. They're out there every single day talking to people, knocking on doors, making those phone calls, visiting folks at the worksite, mobilizing, holding elected officials accountable, and making sure that our voices are heard. At the state and local level, AFT and AFSCME are leading the effort to defend public services and strengthen our ability to stand up, to speak out collectively. And we're doing that every single day. We can't stop. We can't stop at all. This is truly a hostile environment. So we've got to be ready and prepared to deal in this kind of environment. But we're having major success all over the country with workers saying that we want to be organized. We understand the importance of unions. We understand that that gives us power and a seat at the table. So we're going to continue to do that. And, we're going to continue to face attacks. We're going to continue to face those challenges. But we believe that we've got a winning formula. And that winning formula is to organize, organize, organize all over the country. We've got new leaders coming into our ranks. We're going to continue to fight back and make our voices heard. And I look forward to the discussion this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Lee. Appreciate that. Coming to you, Randy, I hear the fight, I hear the action, I hear the determination. Can you take us back to that beginning of this second administration of Donald Trump? I knew you knew a lot of what was coming, but as you saw it playing out?
So look, what I love is I get to go second after my dear friend and colleague and brother Lee, so I can say ditto, 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 ditto. And we part of what Lee dwelled on, and I want to just I'm going to answer your question, Laura. I'm really also just delighted and honored to be at SLU today with you and with Lee. But part of what I wanted to do in terms of the answer is to also situate how AFSCME and AFT have fundamentally done, with other unions, particularly with SEIU, particularly with NEA, we did something that no one actually expected us to do. That in the aftermath of Janus, and the Janus case was an AFSCME case.
Yes.
The four unions came together because it was an AFSCME case. That meant that Lee Saunders and AFSCME were in the courts. They were in the Supreme Court. They were the lead.
Just remind our audience what Janus was about, briefly for those who don't remember.
What Janus was about was essentially the idea that the idea that you could take away everyone's right in the public sector to have a union. And the way in which they did it was to say that the cases that had been done up until then that said if the union actually represented you, you at least paid an agency fee, that those cases were violative of the First Amendment. Now, under the contract clause, if the union actually represented you, then you were under the contract clause. So this court was intent on trying to rip away not only people's rights to organize in the public sector, but also rip away the way in which public sector unions got financed by essentially saying you could opt out anytime for anything in the public sector. And what happened was that the four unions got together and said, no, we're not going to let them take away a fundamental right to have a union. And we worked together. We were not, all four of us were not in the AFL-CIO. Two of us were, two of us were not. But we showed our members, and our members created member organizing committees in schools, in bus depots, all across the country. And when the Janus decision came down and said, you can opt out at any time, virtually no one opted out.
Yeah.
Because the people knew, the people we represented, and frankly, both AFSCME and we have grown since that point. We are now at 1.8. I think we're close to 1.85 million. Because so I start there because, and that's in some ways what Lee and I also learned to do together, collectively, collaboratively in New York City when we were both there. That instead of actually taking the fear and despair and being despairing about it, be honest about what is coming at us, but then say, how do we make hope win? How do we keep hope alive? How do we organize to make the light and the hope and the prospect of having a union and the power of a union real? And that has been the two of our through lines, for the last 30, 40 years. And that's why I wanted to use the Janus decision. Look, in New York, many, many years ago, we did a fair share rally with 1199. Like Giuliani was the mayor. He, basically used the unions and had the unions and our members absorb all the problems in terms of the finances. And what we did, frankly, in 1999 is we said, hell no. And we did this fair share rally that showed, instead of despair, people from all across the public sector and hospital workers coming together and saying, no, Mr. Mayor, there needs to be fairness in this town. And I think what happened with Trump coming in again, there was a sense, Biden had been one of the best union presidents probably ever, in terms of his view of the importance of unions, the importance of workers. But what had happened is nothing happens outside of the context of where we have been, which was that for literally 30 years before Joe Biden became president, including in Barack Obama's era, there had been a real disassociation between the Democratic Party and workers.
Yeah.
Now, part of it is the Citizens United case and how money is so important in politics. Part of it is what has happened in the economic issues and how business moved from the Midwest to other places, globalization, big tech. There's a lot of things that are part of it. But what I think became clear to me in the run up to the 2024 election and then in its following is that non-college graduates, working people in America, white, Black, Latino, they didn't feel a common bond. The people who were unions voted in a higher rate for Kamala Harris than working people who are not in unions. But there was this common bond that had happened between starting with FDR and the depression of 27, 29, 30 in the 30s. That common bond had frayed.
Yes.
And that it was clear that if you do not actually make that common cause again in terms of workers and a party that supports them, then the greatest salesman in our generation, Donald Trump, could be able to suggest to people that he was for working people when it was exactly the opposite. And so I think that what you're hearing from the way in which Lee described it so beautifully is that there was a fight back that we said, just like we had with Janice, just like we had when the two of us were in New York, and dealing with Giuliani. No, we are bigger than this. We have an obligation to fight for working people. No, we're not going to die.
Yep.
And if we do, we're going to go down fighting, because working people have a right to a better life. And so slowly what we started doing ourselves is we came up with a whole bunch of strategies that started with C. Go to the courts and the court of public opinion. Go to the Congress, also engage in commerce, but really connect with each other, connect as a union, connect with working people, connect with our members, regardless of their ideology, because we had to do what King said in his last book, chaos or community.
Or community.
And they were going to do chaos, and they were going to run in and do everything they could to undermine who the levels, the levers of power that working people have, and they were going to try and kill them.
Yeah.
Labor, education, and politics. And we have slowly actually kind of pushed back on virtually everything, sometimes in the courts, sometimes the courts of public opinion, like No Kings, sometimes in elections, like what happened last November, sometimes in the Congress, and sometimes like what we're doing, like the boycott of Target and others in commerce.
So interesting, everything that the two of you have said, and I truly appreciate you, Randy, setting the clock back at Janice, starting that conversation there, because as people on this call and this webinar may remember, at that time too, people were saying this is a death knell for the unions. They will be stripped of their ability to raise revenue. And indeed, the organizing around that was some of the most forceful that we had seen since, I would say, the preceding conflict in Wisconsin. Where the work of the right of public workers to organize and bargain collectively was under attack back in 2011 under the Scott Walker regime. Coming to you, Lee, I mean, what I'm hearing is out of fight comes organizing, out of the attack comes the fight, and maybe an organizing opportunity like never before. But I do want you to begin with the courts for people to understand what you all did. Early in 2025, there were a couple of court challenges to those layoffs. One of them came from the unions. And I think to many in the public, that was our first sense of, wow, watch these unions in action. It does make sense to have a union. Look what they can do and what they're doing for the benefit of everybody. So just for people that don't remember, that first action in the courts, Lee, what happened and why where does that stand today?
Are you talking about with the federal government and the
Yes,
layoffs
with the
there?
federal government in the district court in California.
Right. Well, we happen to represent federal workers in some areas across the country. And one of our strategies when we knew that we were going to be under attack was to identify the necessary cases and take the administration to court. And we have been highly successful, and Randy's done the same thing. I mean, we've been highly successful in holding back these attacks by the current administration because the courts have sided with us. As a matter of fact, when they tried to lay off all those federal workers in certain agencies, none of our members with AFSCME, who are members of AFSCME, were laid off because we immediately took them to court. So we've had a lot of success.
I mean, I only ask you to reiterate that because we don't have a labor media, and apart from CityWorks, there aren't enough media outlets really with megaphones to remind the public that this happened. So keep going. I just want to put an exclamation mark at the end of what you just said.
So, I mean, that was one area in the courts where we were very successful. Another area was when they tried to make changes within Social Security structure. And again, we took them to court and we were able to win. So we have had successes in taking them to court, but I've got to tell you, that's not the sole answer. I mean, we've got to do much more. And one of the things that we have done, and Randy mentioned the 4-union coalition, but what we have done has been to, number one, recognize that the attacks are real and they are not going to stop. And how are we going to deal with those attacks? And how can we not only play defense, but how do we go on the offense? And the way that you go on the offense, where we have been extremely successful, is that we had to, number one, accept that we had to make change from within our own unions to deal with the crisis at hand.
Describe some of those.
What do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? Let's go back to Janice. and the fact that we lost fair share. Everyone thought that when we lost fair share, it would be the death knell for our unions.
That's right.
We understood quickly that we could not do business as usual and expect people to stay as members if they didn't have to. Some would want to leave. So what we had to do was to create a program, and the 4 unions did this very successfully. We created an educational program. We brought our leaders in, we talked to our activists, and we told them that we had to reconnect with our members. And we had to talk to them. We just couldn't rely upon some law that could either let them remain in the union or take them out. It was up to us to keep them in. And the way that you keep them in is to show that you're an activist union, that they're fighting for them every single day, and they're a part of that battle, and they're a part of that fight. And that's exactly what we did. We went back to basics, essentially.
Yeah.
And we started knocking on doors and making phone calls. We identified people at the work sites that would go around talking to not only our members to strengthen their acumen, but we went to those non-members saying, we cannot be as strong as we can be without you.
Yeah.
And you've got to continue to be a part of this union. So the way that you do that is to pay dues. But here are the kinds of things that you'll be covered and we'll be fighting for you every single day, whether it's contract negotiations or better benefits, better pensions, safety and health on the job. We could fight, but we needed all of us together to make that fight. It couldn't be a small percentage of us. It had to be everyone that was in that bargaining unit. And people listened to that. And especially when they started feeling the attacks at the bargaining table or having their rights taken away from them. And they said, no, we need our union and we need to be active. And so it was an educational process for us, but it worked. And we went back to basics by talking to folks and listening to what they had to say.
Lee, coming back to you just again for a second, and Randy, I'll come with you to the similar question. Why has it been such a central part of the right's strategy to strip specifically public employees from the right to collectively bargain? Lee.
Why has it been such a, I'm sorry.
Yes.
What was it?
Why has it been such a central part of the right's strategy to strip public sector employees from collective bargaining rights?
Because we represent power and we represent organization across the country. And the 4 public sector unions that we talked about, public service unions that we work with very closely, and other unions represent public service workers. But you look at NEA, AFT, SEIU, and AFSCME, and we're very vocal, we're very loud, we're very proud, and they know that we fight for our members and we fight for public services across the country. And they don't want us to have that kind of power. So they've beamed in on us, thinking that they were going to be successful because, number one, of Janice, and that we were not getting the dues that we were normally relying upon. They never expected that we would turn it around and say, well, Janice is the law of the land, so we're going to have to deal with it differently. And the way that we deal with it differently is to put together an aggressive program on the ground and talking with our members and our potential members within that bargaining unit saying, you want to still have a bargaining table? You still want to be able to negotiate for better wages and benefits? Then you've got to be a part of this union. That's what makes us strong. And that simple message, and with all of the people that delivered that message, our members, our activists, our retirees who were critical in this, people understood it. And that's why I don't care if we ever see fair share again within the public sector. I really don't, because I think that we have successfully organized and we will continue to organize our members and non-members where they are paying dues and they understand the importance of representation and having that seat at the table. And that's what we had to do. We had to go back to basics.
To take that, all of you who said Janice was going to kill you off. Randy, coming to you with the same question. Again, just to sort of put a pin on it, why public workers are so specifically targeted and so important, that relationship with government. And I mean, you've talked about why Why the right's afraid of
Fascists.
Why do fascists hate teachers?
Why do fascists fear teachers? Yes, I wrote a book about all of this. It's now under my computer, so I can't even pull it out.
You know
so,
it.
I would say, let me kind of build on what Lee just said, which is, how do regular people have any power? They have it really in three ways. One is through education, the skills and knowledge that people have so that they can, navigate their own lives and career, college, civic engagement, education, public education, higher education. See how that gets attacked. Number two, through unions. Most people in life, unless they have some rights through, the government, minimum wage, Social Security, Medicare, occupational safety and health. Most people are are at will employees. They can be fired for any reason or no reason at all. It's a union that gives people rights. It's a union that creates fairness. It's a union that creates a voice at work. And then the third is, and I remember what I've been in Detroit a lot, so I've been reminded about what Ruther would say, which is that what you can get at the bargaining table, you can lose in elections, like what Scott Walker did. As Lee said earlier, none of us have any rights federally. We are trying to get the a federal labor law called the Public Sector, Negotiation Act. But so the third way is through the political process, through electing people who care about working people, not just care about what their donors care about. So if you think about it, we and many of Lee's members are, paraprofessionals or assistants in schools. We essentially stand in the middle of all three ways that working people have power. So if they get rid of us, they get rid of the power of working people. And that's why they go after us. It's not personal to them. And they throw spaghetti. It's about power. And they throw spaghetti on the wall, and they figure out which things have some friction. Which things can they create a division about? Which things can they create a culture war about? And then that's what they go after. All you have to do is look at Project 2025, and you see that. Book banning, really? Like books are part of what creates literacy and in America. So now we're going to ban books, as opposed to then saying, okay, parent, you no longer have a right to have this book in the library. That's your decision about what books people can read, not the government's decision. But the second piece I would say is this: just like Lee, in each of our unions, we figured out a way to take the emergency of the existential crisis of, will our members opt out of the union? And we organized in terms of what the union was about and its importance. But then the key is, how do you continue it? How do you not revert back to what had happened, which is that people saw the union as an insurance company there when you needed it, as opposed to they owned it. And so for us, for example, this year we given out $3 million of what we call MOVE grants, ways in which we create engagement at a local level, so that people use these grants as an organizing tool, things they may not have money for themselves. And by doing $3 million worth of these grants, we have hit about probably locals and state organizations that cover about 600,000 of our members. Every year now in our union, we have a big poster that we hope gets put on school bulletin boards or hospital bulletin boards, because we're now the second largest nurse union. And it says, what the AFT does. So it's a big poster. And so people can see themselves in what we do and how we make a difference. Because some people want politics. And one of my leaders said, look, it's like many votes in a river. Maybe you take this boat, maybe you take that boat, but how do we find the different ways that people want to get involved? So some of it is through education, some of it is through politics, some of it is through people go through our student debt clinics. It's just, how do you find that resonance? How do you find that connection? Again, connection and community.
Beautiful. Thank you, Randy. Again, what I'm hearing is this: how do we create a different we? We see that Donald Trump is very good at creating us versus them, creating division, creating divides. That is easy to do when people are not feeling particularly connected and are susceptible to messaging that those over there are taking rights from you over here. You talked about Wisconsin, 2011, the election of Scott Walker, going after collective bargaining rights for public employees in the state that was the first to give those rights to those employees back in 1959. That was rooted a lot in a kind of racial disparity, a racial divide. That racial divide plays out in this conversation too. And while I want to come back to some of the organizing, I do just want you to tie those strings together, if you would, Lee, because again, we have a media that loves to silo topics. But when those attacks on public workers happened, what did we see? We saw mass layoffs of no group more than women of color, 40,000 women of color. So attacking public employees also has a racial angle, if you will. Can you talk about that?
Sure. It is an attack on people of color, because if you look at the percentages in the public sector, it's a higher percentage of workers when you compare it to private sector. In the public sector, it's a higher percentage of African Americans and Latinos than it is in the private sector. That has been a way for families of African Americans, Latinos, and other minorities to move up and to get ahead. My family, my dad was a city bus driver in Cleveland, Ohio. He was able to provide a decent standard of living, a way of life to my brother and me and my mother, because he was in a union, Amalgamated Transit Union, and they had rights and benefits, and they were able to have that seat at the table to negotiate. And the public sector and the public service offered that to a number of minority families all across the country. Make no mistake about it. So that's one of the reasons that we're under attack as well. And we just have to call it like it is.
Yeah.
They want to take our power away from us. They want to take the successes that we have been able to gain through being in a union and that having that seat at the table. They want to snatch that away from us.
Yeah.
So it can result in a lot of dissatisfaction and people not being happy about their environment and what they're doing. And it weakens us and it weakens them. And we just got to continue to work very hard, not only within the labor movement, but with our community partners as well, who think like us, who share the same kinds of ideas that we have, who believe that everyone deserves a shot at this elusive American dream, whatever that might be right now. And unions are one way in which you can achieve those goals. And we've got to broaden our tent where it's just not labor fighting. Now, we're going to take the lead, and we should take the lead because we're an organized force in this country. But we've got to develop alliances with other organizations around the country who think like we do.
Yeah.
Who are just as frightened about what is going on in this country right now. Whatever those reasons might be, we've got to coalesce with them and say, we've got a big tent. Come into this big tent and fight with us. And that's not saying that you've got to be a part of a union to do that. That is saying that philosophically, we have certain ideals and we have things that we stand for. And we've got to develop a much broader coalition to deal with the challenges that confront us. The bad folks are so busy trying to divide and conquer. Yeah. I mean, that is their game.
Yeah.
They want to divide and conquer. They want to pull people away from that coalition. We have a challenge of keeping folks together, but we have the right message. Yeah. I mean, it is real clear what the administration is trying to do. They're trying to take power away from working people, whether you're in a union or not in a union. They want to take that power away from you, and they want to have it themselves.
Yeah.
And they're pretty greedy folks, to be quite honest with you. I mean, they've got
Very.
a lot of money and they want more money. I mean, we just want to have a standard of living that is fair and equitable for everyone. And we've got to stand up and make our voices heard and make sure that people understand that this is a bigger fight and we need a larger tent, a broader tent, but labor is going to be the central force in all of this battle.
We talked about people of color, Randy. Of course, unions and public sector unions have also been a place of security for LGBT people like you and me. There has been organizing on that front as well. One of the initiatives I would love you to talk about is the Put Families First campaign initiative and what it did to help build cross-union and cross-class solidarity.
Well, what we did last, sorry about what we did last year is when we saw all of the fights, I mean, when we saw what the big tax bill was going to be, we once again put, AFSCME, NEA, SEIU, ourselves and others, and many others from outside of our movement. And we said, let's actually create this bigger tent to explain to people what these Medicaid cuts were going to be, what the SNAP cuts were going to be. So what happens right now is clearly Donald Trump has a megaphone that nobody else has right now. And frankly, I'd like the Democratic Party to be better about it. Both Lee and I left the DNC. He'll speak for himself. I left because I thought we needed to have some more independence about who we were and what we were. And even if we were fighting for the same exact things, the most important thing I can say to answer your questions, Laura, over and over again, is you have to actually, it's not what you say, it's what is heard right now. The people who read regular media, traditional media, voted for Kamala Harris. The people who don't read anything voted hugely for Donald Trump. And so if you don't create that big tent that Lee was talking about, and it doesn't matter in some ways on any of the issues. I have never said as much as I say these days that I am a lesbian. I've never said as much as I say these days that I'm Jewish and married to a rabbi, because I think that using identity to try to create that big tent becomes very important to show that we all have to be part of that big tent, and that people, when you show up and when you engage with people and people then see, oh, that negativity that somebody was saying about somebody who is gay, or that DEI is a negative thing, as opposed to that is what this country has gone through for 60 years in the recreation of ensuring that everyone has rights. And you have to find a way to talk to people about it. And that's part of what Putting Families First was. It's a way of trying to say, this is really important. And I think what you're seeing with affordability, particularly on healthcare, as being such a major thing, is we didn't win the big, beautiful bill battle. But what's happening is, as Lincoln said, public sentiment is everything. Yeah. When you have it, you can win things. When you don't have it, you're going to lose things. And ultimately, what I think Putting Families First did was it started explaining what the choices were that Trump was making, that he'd rather give tax cuts to billionaires than to fund rural hospitals, than to fund food services, than to fund, Medicaid and Medicare, which is essentially the basis of our health system.
One of the audience questions coming in, and I encourage people to pose their questions, is for both of you about strikes. Are strikes on the table for the AFT and AFSCME? And is the talk that we're hearing around general strike anything you're listening to seriously, taking seriously, insofar as you can talk about it, Lee?
Well, people need to understand the facts and what that means, what that question really means. And again, it's different in the private sector versus the public sector. In the public sector, in many cases, we do not have the right to strike. In some cases, we do, but in many cases, we don't. And if that's the case where you do not have the legal right to strike, you've got to be very, very, very careful not to undermine the power that you have and the power that workers have by going on strike and giving an excuse to the employer saying, oh, they're on strike, it's illegal, fire all of them. And that can happen. Yeah. I mean, they play hardball, and we've got to understand that. In areas where we have the ability to strike, then you go through the negotiations. I mean, if something isn't going your way and you want to make a statement, and you strategize about what that statement might be, then a strike may be possible. And I've participated in a number of strikes, but it's a very difficult question. And we just can't say, okay, let's just go out on strike, because there are implications, there are legal implications, especially for public service workers, where they could actually lose their jobs. And you don't want to put anyone in that kind of position. Now, sometimes people are going to say, we've just got to make our voices heard. And I get that as well, but it's got to be a strategic choice. We've got to be smart about how we deal with it. And we've got to have partners that are going to be supporting those workers who are taking that choice as far as withholding their labor. But it's not as simple as saying, well, if we don't like this, then we'll just go out on strike. Not in the public sector.
Anything you want to add to that, Randi?
It's a much more difficult situation.
So I think that, and because I saw a little bit about May Day too, I think that the notion of withholding labor as a way of trying to deal with having the rights and the fairness that people should have in America, I understand the impulse. And I understand the sense of, if only we could get everybody on the same day or totally together to withhold their labor, would it make a difference to Donald Trump? Would it make a difference in this country? And so we have a lot of these conversations going on within our union. I'm not going to talk about where they are or what they are, for all the reasons that Lee just said. And I think what you're seeing now, and I say this as someone who, I think my union in locals have gone on strike probably more than anybody else in the last 10 years. And our union has also grown. We have like 250 new units in the last 4 years. So we're the strategic use of withholding services after you've tried everything else is what happens in a normal, if you can, is what happens in, and you have to be willing to be aggressive about it, is what happens in a normal public sector conversation. But the May Day piece, I think, is really instructive, because a lot of people started thinking May Day initially, oh, that's going to be a day of general strike. Oh, there's going to be a few people who will do it and then others will not. What has happened is that the May Day conversation has become a conversation about, can we show workers doing something to say we want a different life? So in Chicago, there's going to be a lot of civic renewal that happens. Some people will be in school, some people will not. There is a day that people can use as civic renewal, which will count for attendance. There are 3,000 places doing May Day work, doing May Day either rallies, teach-ins, no shopping, no work, no school, like what happened in Minnesota on January 23rd. And what is really impressive is that this is not just unions. Indivisible is doing this kind of economic work. Other groups that we've been working with on No Kings are doing this as well. So May Day is actually as an International Solidarity Day and Workers' Day, it's actually people in their capacity of workers are starting to say, no, we need to do more about affordability. We need to take this day and show some economic resistance and resilience. And I think that that has been the what has happened from the general strike talk to actually action in terms of over 3,000 events on May Day.
People can find out more, I believe, through maydaystrong.org. And
Yep.
another aspect of what you've just described, Randy, is that it does bring organized workers into alliance with non-organized workers, with consumers, with family members,
Exactly.
with regular old civilians. And on that note, there's a question here about another aspect of our power as people, and that's our pension funds and our capital, the union capital. So one of the questions here is, what role do you think workers' capital can play in securing retirement for members and also in corporate responsibility? Randy.
Well, so whoever suggested that also probably knows that we have spent the last 10 years really focused on worker capital. We have a trustee council within the AFT. And when we look around that council, you're talking about $4 trillion of money. And we often, as unionists, we have to do this in a careful way, using our fiduciary abiding by our fiduciary duties. But we often do not actually exercise the power of deferred benefits the way we should. And so we are trying to do that in different kinds of ways. So, for example, we sent a letter to Target a few weeks ago, right at around the time of the occupation by the federal government of Minnesota, to Minnesota, that said, why are you not, we're writing to you not only as consumers of your products, but we own about 7% of your stock. And why are you not, or actually probably even more than that, I'm not looking at the letter, why are you not listening to the people in Minnesota, the place that you are headquartered, the place that you started? They want you to be with them, telling ICE to stay out. And of course, they disregarded that letter. And what we're doing now, and we're going to the AFL-CIO convention with this resolution ourselves, is we're asking everyone around the country, starting with our members, that for back to school, buy local, don't buy Target. You know, there's 2 times for retailers that are really big times for them. One is Christmas and the other is back to school. So first, using our pension funds, but also using ourselves as consumers and to try to actually get these corporations or get the moneyed interest, the capital interest in the country to be far more aligned with workers.
Lee, are you likewise using pension fund power?
We're exploring the ways in which you can do that, especially in the public sector. But we're also exploring how we can use our own funds, the pension funds. I mean, we've got we've got large staff all over the country. We have our own pension fund where we can that we control, so we can make statements that maybe sometimes we can't make in the public sector to get folks' attention. But it's not that the huge pot of money that you would think that's controlled by the private sector or controlled by public sector funds. I mean, that's a lot of money, and we've got to continue to try to be creative about how we deal with that problem. But we also have regulations that we've got to deal with, and what you can do and what you can't do. And we've got to be sensitive to that.
Yeah.
And we are not putting our members' retirements in jeopardy. And so it's a complicated question that we've got to continue to take a look at.
Yeah.
But I mean, we've got to be careful with this. I mean, and it's we don't want to give an excuse to the folks that want to take us out of the ballgame completely to say we've got them here.
Yeah.
And we can hurt them through their pensions, through the pension programs of their members, whether it's state or local government or however they might want to do that.
Yeah.
So we've got to be very careful.
That's why what Lee just said, that's why you heard me say the fiduciary, you have to always look at it
Yep.
through the lens of fiduciaries.
There are forward-looking questions and there are where do we stand now questions. And I think I'll start with the where do we stand now questions. Several people have asked questions about where do we stand now vis-a-vis the Department of Education. So that's one for you, Randy. And the other is to you, Lee, that a lot of people want to know with respect to those layoffs, with respect to the legal challenges, where do we stand now vis-a-vis federal employment? Have people got their jobs back? Where does this, how would you describe the situation at this moment? Maybe let's start with you, Lee, on the federal employment side. Where do things
I think
stand?
I said this earlier. We have taken the administration to court. We represent federal employees. We have not lost one federal employee. And they have gone back to work based upon the legal challenges that we've put in place in the courts. And we're going to continue to do that. Yeah. We've been successful in doing that. And we're going to continue to do that. Although I will say this, the other side is going to continue to try to do everything that they can to undermine unions, to undermine workers who are providing essential services at the federal level. And we're just going to have to continue to take them to court every single day that they attempt to challenge the rights of those workers. We're going to file our court cases, and we'll continue to win. We'll continue to win. But that's a defensive strategy. Also, we've got to think more offensively as far as not only the labor movement coming up with new ideas and new thoughts about how we can connect to workers, but also attracting those folks that aren't in unions that share our opinions and share our positions on things and ask them to be involved in this fight. This is not a spectator sport. I mean, you've got to be involved every single day, and you've got to make up your mind about what you're going to fight for and what you believe in. Because
some of our people may have heard of FUN, the Federal Unionist Network, not an actual union, but representing some of the federal employees who have been laid off in different departments like Justice and elsewhere, USAID. How does AFSCME relate to them?
We work in coalition, yeah. And we sit down and we're talking with them all the time.
Good example.
Whether it's through the AFL-CIO and those labor unions who are not a part of the AFL-CIO, we still sit down and we talk with them, especially at the federal level, because we represent federal employees, we have certain things in common. And we've got to have a joint strategy where we can fight back and be as strong as we can possibly be and share the victories that we have with the other unions, and they share those victories with us. And so we can continue to develop an aggressive program and an aggressive plan.
And Randy, Department of Education.
So let me just also say to your other question, that's part of the reason why I joined with people when Sarah Nelson and the Mayor Mondami and Bernie Sanders launched Union Now. Because part of Union Now, part of what FUN is we have to actually work in the liminal spaces. We have to work in a way that if we can't there's somewhere between 40 and 70% of people in America that would want to be in a union if they could be in there right now. It depended upon how you ask that question. There's 9 to 10% who are in unions now. Part of what we have to do through the AFL-CIO and other ways, and that's what Lee is talking about when he says all these other alliances. There's a moment now. People get that they need economic power. How do we try to help them get that economic power? In terms of education, this administration wants to essentially end public education as we know it. And what they tried to do with getting rid of the Department of Education is they wanted to get rid of the programs that actually fund public education and fund higher education. And we won the suits to stop them from, there's 2 suits that I'll talk about very briefly. We won the suit to stop them from dismantling the department until it went to the shadow docket. And we lost the injunction, for those of you who have read the New York Times about the shadow docket, we lost the injunction at the shadow docket, and they went immediately to basically sell it off for parts. Because, by the time you get to the merits, they'll sell it off for parts. But this is the thing that we have won and what we are fighting for. I often say, let's focus on the function, not the form. So we won the case that basically said you can't get rid of DEI. You can't get rid of 60 years of civil rights law. We won that case. We won it in the courts below, and we won it in the appellate courts, and the Trump administration gave up its appeal. So the appellate courts are the rule of the land, and that's the Fourth Circuit, and that's AFT versus McMahon. And that basically says they cannot, by fiat, get rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Number two, in the Congress, we have kept the funding formulas. So we've kept Title I. We've kept IDEA. We've kept the basic funding formulas. Will they try to make mincemeat out of everything? Yes, because they don't care about children and they don't care about young people. Does this mean we need another president and we need to actually change who's in the Congress? Yes, because the courts can't do it all. To be forward focused, we need to actually change things to make sure they can never do this again, to undermine children like they are right now.
So you've teed up this next question beautifully, Randy, and that has to do with elections and what we get out of them. One question people have is, are union reps running for office? That's one thing. But more broadly, I think if I was to summarize a bunch of the questions that have come in looking to the future, you've both mentioned Project 2025 and the concerted, long-time, decades-long plan on the right to devastate the union sector. What would you like to see coming out of Democratic wins in the fall that is proactive in the way that you're describing, and you both talked about leaving the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, but has the penny dropped among Democrats about what is to be gained from picking fights? Senator Wellstone used to talk about some fights you have to pick to win, not just go where popular opinion is. So with respect to negotiations with AI, with respect to national health care, with respect to worker rights, are there certain things you would put on your Project 2028 that you would like to see electeds embracing in the midterms? Randy.
So I need about an hour to answer this question, but I will try to add. No. But I'll try
We'll bring
to
you on
answer
to
it.
City Works.
I'll try to answer it in a shortcut way, which is this. What I learned from 2024 is that when we talk so much about democracy, people heard us saying, you want the status quo. They didn't hear us saying that we want a democracy to make things better, and that the people that are elected, we need to elect people not so we're just in a majority, so that they are in a majority to do shit, excuse my language, to do things for people. And so we need, I think the Democratic Party has to make common cause with working people. And that will mean certain shifts, so that the question then becomes, for somebody who's elected, are you doing this for your donors or are you doing this for working people? And Citizens United and these other cases have made that harder for people who are in the leadership of the Democratic Party. And we need them to be accountable for workers. So one of the things that I have really pushed hard for is a working class tax cut. Because how is it that we're going to actually get people how can we get to address affordability when some of the bigger programs are going to take time? When to get union contracts from 9% to 70%, it's going to take time. So how do we actually get Democrats elected? Look, the worst Democrat has an 80% voting record with us. The best Republican has a 10% voting record with us. So how are we going to get people to make common cause with working people, and then working people see it? And that actually is what we've been talking to our members about. So when you have a Taylor Remmitt from Texas, who's just been elected for the state house, a union machinist, that's fantastic. A Jen Mizaka, who's just been elected to the state house in Pennsylvania. But it's going to be more than union members elected. It's going to mean, what is the common cause that Democrats make with working people? So when that question is asked, are you doing this for a working person, or are you taking a pass on it because your donors need you to do it? We need them to do it for working people and make common cause with working people.
Common cause seems to be being found across the left and the right, Lee, when it comes to some issues. I'm thinking specifically around the mobilization we're seeing around AI data centers and so forth. Bernie Sanders and others believe that that is a massive organizing potential area. Where else do you see real focused, smart focus from Democratic electeds leading into this
I
next
think
election?
you have to go back to basics and what people are feeling. And if you look at it, you look at the food prices, you look at gasoline prices, you look at decline in health benefits, you look at job loss, you look at the threat with pensions. I mean, you look at all of those things that impact directly on working people, and you've got to develop an aggressive program in dealing with that and saying that we cannot accept what certain folks want to do to enrich themselves while the majority of people are going to be hurt through the things that I just outlined. And that provides the formation of a larger organization, and not organization, but a larger group of people coming together and saying enough is enough. I mean, they're feeling it. Working people are feeling it every single day, whether you're in a union or not. People know how expensive it is to live. When you go to the store, you can't afford to buy the kinds of things that you want. The gasoline prices, the fact that prices are going through the roof, can't even afford your own home right now. And people have got to organize around those issues and say, enough is enough. Now, what is the solution? How do we deal with these issues? Well, you've got different kinds of approaches. But clearly, those that are in power right now believe that the way you deal with those issues is to continue to smother working people and give more wealth to the folks that already got a boatload of money that want more. I mean, and it's just as plain and simple in my mind as that. And then you make a choice. You make a choice saying you're either going to make your voices heard and fight for your families and your communities who are suffering right now, or you're going to just let this continue. And we've got to change. We've got to change the direction of this country, and it's going to take workers and working families in our communities and our allies to stand up and say enough is enough, and we aren't putting up with this stuff anymore. We are not, and we're going to organize, and we're going to organize, and we're going to make our voices heard. And in November and beyond November, we're going to vote your asses out of office. I mean, it's just as simple and plain as that. But we've got to have a large, we've got to have a large group of folks that understand that this is not playing around. I mean, and November offers us an opportunity. This coming November offers us an opportunity to make a forceful change and say enough is enough. And shame on us if we don't take advantage of that.
Randi?
And I think, if you don't mind, just building on what Lee said, we have to be a both and. And there are always going to be issues that divide who is part of team humanity. And, AI may be an issue in terms of, do you do a moratorium on data centers, or do you try to figure out how to make them work in communities for communities? There are different ways of solving that problem. But the point is this, the bigger issue is that, I'm not saying AI isn't a big issue, it's a huge issue, but the bigger issue is, how do we get the bums out who don't care about workers. They've made it clear. People see it now. How do we actually get them out of office? But you can't stop there. It has to be, if people get elected into office, if people who we love are our champions right now who stay in office, how do they not just do the contrast with Trump, but how do they fight for policy for a better life? And I think we have to do both of those things. It's obvious right now that the affordability concerns that people cannot, I mean, my members, I see it in polls, in stuff we've been taking. People are choosing, my members, between going to the doctor and eating. People sometimes are taking days off, personal days, because they can't afford gas to get to work. So this is paycheck to paycheck is a norm, not an exception. So we have to deal with the primal issues, but really, we have to make this country work for an American dream again. And that's what I hear over and over again.
If people want more Randi Weingarten fire, they will find it in her book, Why Fascists Fear Teachers. And it's available at the AFT website. That's aft.org. The link is in the Zoom. You have both given beautiful closing comments, but I want to give you a chance to give a couple more minutes worth of closing comments, especially what can people do? Now, Lee, there may be some who have been so inspired by you that they will be aghast to hear that you announced that you were retiring from your role as president of AFSCME. See, Randi is one, in August of this year. Who's following you in a general sense? How confident are you that they will have your same fire? And what are you going to be doing? Twiddling your thumbs?
Well, we have our own process in our union as far as electing officers, and I respect that process. And I'm sure that the delegates who vote for the next president will do the right thing, and will continue down the road that we need to continue down, and that is to be vocal, that is to be loud and proud and fight for working people all over the country. And I'll be a part of that, whether I'm president or not. I mean, that's in my soul, that's in my blood. But what we have to do also is to enlarge our tent, because so many people right now are being affected in a very negative way and are suffering every single day, and are fighting to make ends meet, whether they're in a union or not. And we've got to coalesce, and we've got to form alliances with individuals who are being affected in that kind of way, saying, there's a better way. There's a better way. But in order to get that better way, you've got to join a movement where we're willing to stand up and make our voices heard and fight every single day, and not be shy about challenging the status quo that exists in this country. And if we do that, and workers coming together and our communities coming together, and we make a statement starting in November, and we continue that motivation and we continue that move to all the way into the following years as far as changing the direction of this country and enlisting more people to be a part of this movement, this overall broader movement, then I got to tell you, we're going to win. We might have some defeats along the way, but we're going to win. But we've got to energize ourselves and convince ourselves that this is possible. And we know what's right and we know what's wrong, and let's do what's right.
Randi, speaking for Team Humanity?
Look, I mean, first, let me just say, as a point of personal privilege, I will miss Lee in this position. We will always be colleagues, but he has been an extraordinary unionist in all this time. And on a very personal note, I really will miss him. We see, I'm going to say that what I said before about 9 and 70. There is a movement in America right now. You can see it with 3,000 events on May Day, with 8 to 10 million people, 8 million people at No Kings. You can see it with what's going on in terms of the ICE centers. You can see it with the elections that happen in November, and virtually all of these off-year elections that have happened, these special elections. You saw in what happened with California and Virginia. And and frankly, you saw it with what happened in Hungary and actually in South Korea. So sorry that I'm being a little teachery with all these examples. People, there's a gnawing sense that people have that something's not right. And they do not want the autocrat. They want their lives to be better, but they don't want somebody who's actually making their lives worse. They don't want somebody who is actually taking freedom away. And here on this 250th anniversary of America, yes, there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of division. And the anger and the division can allow an autocrat to flourish and can allow billionaires to flourish. But my hope is, and my sense is, and my reliance is, that the American people are going to say no. Yeah, we may disagree about a bunch of stuff, but we do not want our country to go in this way. We want our country to be team humanity, team dignity. I see it every time there's a tornado, there's a fire. I saw it in Minnesota. This notion of a sense that we are going to embrace our neighbor, we're going to help each other, we're going to have fairness. We have to organize it. We have to mobilize it. But that is who Americans are. And that is what I think we're going to see in November 2026. But shame on us if we don't take the day after the election in November 2026 to actually make a more perfect union.
Thank you. Thank you, Randi Weingarten, Lee Saunders. It has been wonderful speaking to you both. I feel fired up. That is it for today's event, produced by the Murphy Institute at the CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies. I urge all of you to check out all of our City Works episodes. If you go to slu.cuny.edu, you'll find links to take you directly to that archive. It has been a pleasure talking with both of you. If you feel fired up, there are actions to be taken on May Day. You can find more information, as I mentioned, at the website, maydaystrong.org. And I'm looking forward to hearing much more from Team Humanity here. I appreciate both of you so much. And thank you to our Zoom audience. That's it for today's event. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm Laura Flanders for
Thank you,
CityWorks.
Laura.
Thank you, Laura.